Wow, it's December 20th, 2024. Why are all these horses riding by Worthington Middle School? And why are they headed up Oxford Street? It makes me curious. I wonder where they came from. I wonder where they're going to. To answer that question, we have to go all the way back to 1862. In 1862, there was a terrible war in Minnesota between the United States government and the Dakota people. This war was short and brutal, and it lasted only 6 weeks. At the end of that war, there were some very unfair trials that were held, and over 300 Dakota men and boys were sentenced to death. People like Bishop Henry Whipple and a few other Minnesotans were concerned about how bad this looked, and they got President Lincoln involved. President Lincoln would spare the lives of most of these Dakota men and boys, but on the day after Christmas, December 26th, 1862, 38 men and boys were hanged in Mankato, Minnesota, all at the same time. There's never been anything like this in American history, and in Minnesota history, it was a dark day, and nothing like this will happen again. This is Jim Miller. He's a Dakota man living on the reservations in South Dakota. Miller had a dream, and his dream was to make sure that people remembered what happened to the Dakota people in 1862. He organized the Dakota 38 plus 2 ride, and from 2005 to 2022, this ride took place. It was to remember the war, the harm that was done, and to promote healing, and also to remember that sad day on December 26, 1862. In 2022, Miller declared that his dream had been accomplished and that there would be no more rides. Ironically, he would die in 2023, the year that there was no ride. Many Dakota did not want to let this idea of a remembrance and a reconciliation ride go. So in 2024, a new ride was announced. The first one was called the Mankato Reconciliation and Horse Ride, and it began just like the traditional ride on the Lower Brule Reservation in South Dakota. Here's a picture of the Lower Brule Reservation area. The second group of riders also organized themselves in 2024. These Dakota came from the Santee Reservation in Nebraska. As you may or may not know, the Dakota were removed from Minnesota after the war in 1862. Some of them ended up on the Crow Creek Reservation in South Dakota. Others would move to the Santee Reservation in Nebraska. The purpose of the two rides was to meet at Reconciliation Park in Mankato, Minnesota. There were many people there to witness the reconciliation. There were many people there that watched the Dakota riders travel through the streets of Mankato. Also, another interesting thing was that they passed through the city of New Ulm for the first time. New Ulm was one of the cities that played a big role in the war in 1862. History is all around us, and to answer those questions I began this video with, the Dakota people ride for many reasons. One of them is to remember the terrible war and to the even more terrible thing that happened on December 26, 1862 with the mass hangings. The ride is also to say that we are still here. And the ride also is to share information on the problems on America's Indian reservations. Some of these problems include a high suicide rate, widespread poverty, alcoholism, and despair.